Hello. My name is Tom, and I'm 43 years old. I've been married to Emily for the past 15 years. To anyone looking in from the outside, we seemed like the perfect couple: 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, a stable life. I thought we had it all figured out. But you know how it goes, is sometimes you get so caught up in the routine that you start missing the little things. And those little things? They can pile up and turn into something bigger before you even realize it. Emily's always been dedicated to her job. She'd often stay late at the office, especially after her promotion. I was proud of her accomplishments, and I believed her ambition was just another reason I'd fallen for her in the first place. But then, something changed. Over the past few months, I started noticing that Emily spent more time on her phone. She talked less and less to me about her day, dodging conversations about work. Anytime I'd ask her about her plans, she'd give me these short, vague answers like she was eager to change the subject. Then, one evening, she got ready for yet another business meeting. But this time, something felt different. She spent a lot more time picking out her outfit. Normally, she'd just throw on something practical for the office, but tonight, she stood in front of the mirror, fixing her hair and putting on makeup. And when I saw her pack the lacy lingerie I'd bought her for our anniversary, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off. I finally asked her, "Emily, why are you packing that lingerie for a work meeting?" She gave me a smirk, like I'd asked a dumb question, and replied, "Tom, it's just a business trip. I need to look presentable, you know?" Sure, I got that. But still, it didn't sit right with me. I didn't argue, though. I just kept quiet and watched as she continued packing. But something inside me shifted. For the first time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I couldn't trust her the way I used to. That night, after she left, I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning as I replayed all those little signs in my head. Maybe I was overthinking it, but that gut feeling wouldn't let go. A few days had passed since Emily came back from her trip. I tried not to dwell on what was bothering me, but those thoughts wouldn't go away. I kept telling myself that maybe I was just being paranoid, that I was imagining things. But something felt off. I knew it. We all feel it when something's wrong, even if we try to ignore it. The next day, I got home earlier than usual. Emily wasn't home yet. She'd told me she'd be working late again. I walked into the kitchen and saw her phone lying on the table. That immediately caught my attention. She never left her phone out in the open. She always kept it with her, even if she was just going to another room. Maybe she forgot it. Or maybe she thought she had nothing to hide. I stood there for a while, debating whether I should pick it up. On one hand, I didn't want to invade her privacy. But on the other hand, I couldn't just ignore everything that had been happening. I had to know the truth. When I unlocked her phone, I went straight to her messages. There was a conversation with her colleague, Jeff. I remembered him. She'd mentioned him a few times. They talked about work, about some meetings, but then, it turned into something else. "I miss you," Jeff had written. And her reply, "I miss you too. Time with you makes me happy." I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Everything suddenly became clear. There was no need to guess anymore. This wasn't just a friendship or casual work chats. It was something more. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared into space, trying to figure out what to do with this new knowledge. When Emily came home later that night, I was sitting in the living room, pretending to watch TV. But I knew we had to talk. We couldn't keep living with all these unspoken truths. Emily came home pretty late. She looked tired, but that wasn't what was bothering me. As she took off her shoes in the hallway, I couldn't take my eyes off her. Too many questions were spinning in my head. But I needed time to think things through. I couldn't just blow up on her right then, even though every part of me wanted to confront her immediately. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. She nodded, tossing her bag onto the couch. "It was fine, just a lot of work," she said, heading into the bedroom. I sat there in the living room, pretending to watch TV, but in reality, I was bracing myself for the conversation. My thoughts were racing. One thing was clear: I couldn't keep living with these lies and pretending everything was fine. When she came back into the living room, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "We need to talk," I said, trying to stay composed, even though I was boiling inside. Emily stopped and turned to look at me like she didn't understand what I was getting at. "About what?" she asked. "About us." I took a deep breath. "I know about you and Jeff. And it's not just work." Her face went pale, and she froze in place. For a moment, she couldn't say anything. Then she finally managed to ask, "What do you mean?" I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "I saw your messages." At first, she stayed silent, not knowing what to say. Then she muttered quietly, "It's just harmless flirting. Nothing serious." "Flirting?" I repeated, feeling the anger start to boil over. "You call that flirting? When you tell him that time with him makes you happy? That's not just flirting, Emily. That's betrayal." She looked away, and silence filled the room. Inside, I was a mess of emotions: pain, anger, disappointment. I felt like our marriage, which I thought was solid, was falling apart right in front of my eyes. "So what now?" I finally asked, trying to figure out what to do next. She looked back at me and whispered, "I don't know." Her words, "I don't know," left me completely stunned. Saying I was shocked doesn't even begin to cover it. How can you not know what to do after destroying everything? I stood there, barely able to contain my emotions. There was so much I wanted to say, but where do you even start? It felt like every word lost its meaning. "You don't know?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though inside I was boiling. "You really don't know what to do next? You do realize nothing will ever be the same after this, right?" Emily looked away. I didn't see any fear or regret in her eyes. Maybe for her, this was all in the past, something she had already come to terms with months ago, while I was just finding out now. That thought shook me. I expected some kind of explanation, maybe even tears, but she just stood there, like she wasn't even going to fight for us. "Do you understand what happened here?" I pressed, trying to control myself. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, desperate for something to give me a sense of clarity. "A few months," she said softly, barely moving her lips. "A few months?" Those words hit me like a final blow. All those nights when she said she was working late, all those times she was too busy to even have dinner with me and the kids. It was all lies. Cold, calculated lies. "You don't even realize what you've done, do you?" I continued, my voice rising. "You've destroyed everything we built. I trusted you, and you just wiped your feet on me. Did you think I'd never find out? Or did you think it didn't matter?" She didn't respond. The silence between us felt like a thick wall. I tried to read her face, to understand if she felt any guilt. But her expression was blank. "If you were unhappy," I finally said, a bit quieter, "why didn't you tell me? We could have talked, figured something out. But you chose another path." Her tears began to fall, but by this point, I wasn't sure if they changed anything. I was hurt, yes. I felt betrayed. But I also realized that she wasn't the same woman I'd spent the last 15 years with. "I can't just forget this," I finally said. "I need time to process all of this." Her tears came harder, but she didn't argue. I felt like, in that moment, it was already decided. My world as I knew it was shattered, and all that was left for me was to let go. After that conversation in the living room, a heavy silence filled the house. Emily went to the bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat on the couch, not knowing what to do next. On one hand, everything was clear: she had cheated, broken our trust. But on the other hand, was there anything left to save? My head was full of questions, but there weren't any answers. I turned on the TV, just to drown out the constant dialogue in my mind, but nothing helped. Every moment we had spent together now felt like a lie. How long had she been hiding this? Was anything between us ever real? I stepped outside to clear my head. The cold night air helped a little, but inside, emotions were still boiling. I sat on the porch steps, trying to figure out what to do next. Divorce? It seemed like the logical option. How could we continue after something like this? But then again, we had 15 years together, 2 kids. It wasn't as simple as it seemed. My heart swung between anger and sadness. Anger, for the betrayal, for the lies. Sadness, for everything we had lost. But more than anything, I felt alone. I had always thought we could get through anything together, and now, it felt like we were worlds apart. I pulled out my phone, thinking about calling someone. It didn't matter who, just someone who could listen. But I stopped myself. I didn't want anyone to know. I wasn't ready to talk about it, wasn't ready for advice or pity. This was my own nightmare, and I had to figure it out on my own. When I went back inside, Emily was already asleep. I looked at her, and it was strange to think that I had once loved her more than anything in the world. But now, I didn't know what I felt. Everything was too complicated. I lay down on the couch and closed my eyes. I knew tough decisions were ahead, but tonight, I just needed a break from all these thoughts. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, feeling the full weight of what had happened crash down on me. My head pounded as if from a hangover. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was emotional burnout. All the thoughts I had during the night hadn't led me anywhere new. I knew I had to make a decision, but I didn't know where to start. Emily was already awake. I could hear her in the kitchen, soft footsteps, the sound of coffee being poured. I didn't know how to act. Should I continue the conversation? Should I give her a chance to explain? Or was it pointless? With a deep breath, I got up from the couch and walked into the kitchen. Emily was standing by the window with a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked tired and worn out. I realized I wasn't the only one living this nightmare, but seeing her didn't change my resolve. "We need to talk," I said, sitting down at the kitchen table. Emily didn't respond right away. She turned away from the window and looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness and fatigue. "I know," she said softly. "I don't want things to be like this." "But they already are," I interrupted, not wanting to let her turn the conversation into excuses. "You made a choice. I can't just forget about it. We need to figure out what happens next." Emily nodded, unsure of what to say. In the silence, I felt us drifting further apart. I had loved her once, but now, sitting at this table, I couldn't understand how everything had changed so much. "What are we going to do?" she finally asked. That question made me stop and think. I didn't have an answer. "I think we need time apart. I'm not ready for a divorce right now, but I'm definitely not ready to keep living like nothing happened." Emily nodded again, her eyes filling with tears, but I couldn't sympathize. My own feelings were too wounded. "I'm going to leave for a few days, think about everything," I said, getting up from the table. "I need space. And you probably do too." She nodded again, and that was the last thing we said to each other in that moment. I went back to the living room and started packing my things. Inside, the storm of emotions still raged, but I knew I had to leave to sort myself out. I packed a few things into a backpack, not really knowing where I was headed. I couldn't stay in the house. Everything there reminded me of our past, a past that now felt like a lie. I gave one last glance at the bedroom where Emily and I had spent so many nights, thinking we had a future together. Now, all that was left of that future was emptiness. I stepped outside, feeling the cool morning air wrap around me. I closed the door behind me and got into my car, but I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, staring out the windshield, lost in thought. Where was I supposed to go? I felt lost. There wasn't one place where I could escape all of this. I had never felt so alone, even when I was surrounded by people. All I wanted was to find somewhere I could forget about everything, even if just for a few hours. Eventually, I drove to a small hotel outside of town, one that a colleague had mentioned to me once. It was a place where people went to reset themselves. I figured that's exactly what I needed right now. A few hours on the road helped clear my head, but when I finally arrived at the hotel and stepped into the small room, the weight of everything came crashing down again. I sat down on the bed, feeling the exhaustion wash over me. It wasn't physical exhaustion, it was the kind that came from my mind not letting me rest. I knew that sooner or later I'd have to make a decision. Either I stay with Emily, or I cut ties completely. But what made it worse was that I wasn't sure what I really wanted. I pulled out my phone and opened it, almost expecting a message or a call. But there was nothing. Nobody knew what was going on. I hadn't called any friends or family because I didn't want to talk about it. But now I felt like maybe I needed help. Alone and lost, I couldn't figure this out on my own. I typed out a short message to my best friend Mark, "I need to talk. Are you busy?" But before hitting send, I stopped myself. Talking to friends might ease the pain, but I knew nobody could give me the answer I was looking for. I put my phone away and closed my eyes. The questions still swirled in my head, but for now, there were no answers. It had been a few days since I left home. I took time off work, telling them I needed some time for myself. Those few days passed in a haze. I would wake up, wander around the hotel, thinking about everything that had happened. My thoughts kept drifting back to Emily and what she had done. The more I thought about it, the stronger the urge grew to find a way to make her feel the same pain she had caused me. But here's the thing, revenge is a double-edged sword. I wasn't the type of person who wanted to ruin other people's lives, even if they had hurt me. Still, every time I thought about how she lied to me, how she hid her relationship with Jeff, I felt like it couldn't end just like that. I picked up my phone and opened the message to Mark again. He had been my friend since childhood, and if anyone could help me, it was him. I started typing, "As she betrayed me, Mark. I don't know what to do. I'm thinking about revenge, but just like before, I stopped. I knew that wasn't the path I wanted to take. And yet, something inside me kept asking for an outlet. I couldn't just let it go. I had to do something to feel better. I thought about telling all her colleagues, making sure she was seen in the worst possible light. Or maybe confronting Jeff and telling him everything I thought of him. Let him know he destroyed someone's life. My rage was looking for a way out. But when I looked at it from a distance, all of it seemed petty and meaningless. Would doing any of that really give me satisfaction? Would it make the pain go away? Probably not. That night, I sat in my small hotel room for a long time, thinking about revenge and justice. But the truth was, no amount of revenge would bring back what was lost. No action would make Emily the woman I once trusted and loved again. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that wouldn't go away. The thought of revenge still lingered in the back of my mind, but now it seemed less appealing, almost pointless. As the night passed, I realized that nothing I did would truly make me feel better. Lashing out wouldn't change anything, and it certainly wouldn't bring back what we'd lost. But the feeling of not being able to just leave everything as it was kept gnawing at me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall. I couldn't hide out in this hotel forever. I had to go back, face it all head on. I couldn't avoid the conversation we needed to have, the closure I needed to find. Whatever was going to happen next, it had to start with facing the truth. I packed up my things slowly, almost mechanically, and left the hotel. The drive back felt endless, like I was moving in slow motion. Each mile brought me closer to a reality I didn't want to face, but I knew it was inevitable. The house wouldn't feel the same when I returned, and I had to be ready for that. When I finally pulled up to the driveway, my heart was pounding in my chest. I stepped out of the car and took a deep breath before walking inside. The silence hit me first. It was a different kind of quiet, not the comfortable peace I once knew, but an unsettling stillness that felt out of place. Emily was sitting on the couch in the living room. She'd been waiting for me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked like she hadn't slept, and maybe that should have made me feel something. But it didn't. I didn't feel sorry for her, and I didn't feel the urge to comfort her. I just felt tired. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat, but calm. There was no rage left in me, no urge to yell. I just wanted answers, even though I knew they wouldn't change what had happened. Emily nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the couch. "I've been thinking a lot, Tom," she said quietly. "I know I've destroyed everything. And I know I can't undo it." Her words hit me, but not in the way they might have a few days ago. They felt hollow now. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but something in me had already broken beyond repair. The trust, the love, it wasn't there anymore. At least, not in the way it had been. "I don't think we can keep going like this," I said, after a long pause. The words came out heavier than I expected, but they felt right. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you for what you've done." She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears again, but I didn't feel what I used to feel. I wasn't moved by her tears anymore. They felt like they belonged to someone I didn't really know. "I understand," she whispered, her voice breaking a little. And in that moment, I knew it was over. The life we had built, the future we thought we were heading towards, it was gone. There was no way back, no way to fix it. And no matter what either of us said, that was the undeniable truth. After that conversation with Emily, something inside me finally clicked. I knew I couldn't keep delaying the inevitable. We couldn't continue living under the same roof, pretending like nothing had happened. This was the moment when I had to make a final decision. I sat in my car for a few minutes, just staring at the house. I saw it as a symbol of everything we had built together. When we bought it, I had imagined growing old here, raising our kids, celebrating family holidays. Now all of that seemed so distant and foreign. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number of the lawyer I had saved a long time ago but never thought I would need. He picked up on the first ring. "Tom, it's been a while." "Something happened?" he asked, trying to sound neutral, but I could tell he already had an idea why I was calling. "We need to meet," I said, feeling a wave of emotions hit me. "I think it's time to move forward." He agreed, and we set up a meeting for the next day. I knew this was the right step, but even now, making this decision, something inside me felt heavy. It wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the end of an entire life I had built, thinking it would go differently. When I got back to the house, I quietly went to the bedroom. Emily wasn't there, and that was probably for the best. I didn't know how I could handle another conversation with her right now. I grabbed a bag and started packing my things. Each movement felt difficult, like something inside me resisted every step. Once I finished, I grabbed my keys and left the house. I decided to stay at the hotel for a few more days while I sorted everything out. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear, and we couldn't keep living like this. The next day, I met with my lawyer. It was a strange conversation. Talking about divorce always feels like something distant and foreign until it happens to you. He listened to me carefully, asked a few questions about our marriage, the division of assets, and the kids. Everything went according to the standard procedure, but I could barely focus on the words. My mind was somewhere else. We talked about splitting the house, how to divide the bills, and what to do with our shared savings. I knew these were just formalities, but it was still a heavy moment. I was ready to move forward, but the emptiness inside hadn't gone away. The lawyer suggested we discuss terms with Emily to avoid unnecessary complications in court. I agreed. After all, the sooner we resolved everything, the sooner I could put this behind me. I didn't want to drag this pain out for months. When the meeting ended, I stepped outside, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a little lighter. It wasn't full relief, but it was the first step toward a new life. Something inside me had begun to shift, as if this process was a kind of cleansing. Still, I knew this was only the beginning. There were a lot of things left to deal with. I still didn't know what I would do next, how to move forward. But one thing was clear, I wasn't the same person I was just a few weeks ago. Emily and I met a few days later to discuss the terms of the divorce. It was a cold, businesslike conversation. We both knew emotions would only complicate things, so we focused on fairly dividing our assets and sorting out the arrangements for the kids. The pain of betrayal still sat deep within me, but I knew we had to do this to finally close this chapter. Once the terms were agreed upon, I realized the end was near. All that was left was to sign the paperwork and move on. But what would moving on even look like? That question lingered in my mind, even as I tried to focus on the future. A few days had passed since Emily and I finalized the divorce terms. We signed all the necessary papers, and now it was just a matter of waiting for the legal process to play out. Honestly, I thought I'd feel relief, but it wasn't that simple. The emptiness was still there, and the thoughts of everything I had lost hadn't left me. Still, I understood that I was now free from the life that could never be the same. Now, I had to figure out how to build a new one. It was a strange feeling, starting over, especially after 15 years spent with someone I once loved and trusted. I was still staying at the hotel, though I knew it was time to find a permanent place. The house Emily and I had shared was going to be sold, and the money would be split between us. We both agreed that neither of us should stay there. There were too many memories, too much pain. One evening, sitting in my hotel room, I thought about the future. A new beginning was ahead of me, but the question was, what would it look like? I knew there would be challenges, but I also felt that there was a chance to build something better. Maybe that's what all of this had been for, to rediscover myself, rebuild my life, and create something new. The next day, I decided to meet up with Mark. He'd been my best friend, but since everything started, I'd tried not to burden him with my problems. I knew he wanted to support me, but I wasn't ready for those conversations before. Now, though, it felt like the right time. We met at a bar near where I was staying. Mark immediately noticed how tired I looked, but when we sat down, I felt a little bit of the weight on my shoulders start to lift. "How are you holding up, Tom?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "To be honest, I still don't know," I admitted, picking up my drink. "Sometimes it feels like I've lost everything. But at the same time, I'm starting to realize maybe this was a necessary step. I don't know how to explain it." Mark nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. "You've always been strong, Tom," he said. "And if anyone can come out of this stronger, it's you." His words gave me a little strength. I knew the road ahead was still long, but maybe, just maybe, I could get through this and come out better on the other side. A few weeks had passed since Emily and I signed the divorce papers. The legal process was moving along, but I already felt free. It was a strange feeling, a mix of relief and emptiness. Sometimes it felt like I was still wandering in the dark, but with each day, something inside me was starting to change. I found a new apartment downtown. It was smaller than our old house, but it was more than enough for one person. I felt like it was a step in the right direction. I liked the idea of a fresh start, even if the path to it had been painful. Gradually, I started opening myself back up to life. I focused on work, diving into projects I had been putting off for a while. I needed something to keep my mind occupied, and work became my way of coping. Sometimes, I still thought about Emily. It wasn't that I missed her, it was more like I was reflecting on how things could have been different. But with each passing day, those thoughts hurt less. I understood that I didn't need to dwell on the past anymore. Whatever happened, I couldn't change it. All that was left was to accept it and move forward. One day, I got a message from Emily. It was short, "How are you?" It was the first time she had reached out since we officially parted ways. I stared at the screen for a long time, not knowing what to say. In the end, I wrote back, "I'm okay. I hope you're doing well." I didn't hear from her again, and that was fine. I didn't need those conversations anymore. That chapter of my life was over, and I was ready for the next one. One evening, I decided to take a walk around the city. I looked at the glowing lights, listened to the hum of the streets, and realized that life goes on. I didn't know what the future held for me, but I was sure of one thing: I could handle it. Sometimes, you have to go through pain to find yourself again. On the horizon was a new day, a new chapter of my life. And I was ready to face it. Bye.